attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Hi everyone, this is Andy Steele. Thanks for tuning in. Today the interview is with Ed Brotherton. He's an activist with We Are Change Los Angeles, and in this interview he talks some about his group's adventures over the years in getting the information out, and he goes over some of the nitty-gritty and getting a local group started and operating, sort of like a primer for those of you out there who would like to do the same thing but don't know how. So stay tuned, I'll be playing that interview very shortly. Alright, here we go. Another episode is underway and we are charging forward. I want to play the following clip from C-SPAN on October 30th of this year, and I'm breaking this for the first time here on the show. The Congresswoman's name here is Diana Degette from Colorado.
Are going to be able to get better plans in the exchange.
All right, well, let's turn to Scott. He's up first in Cortland Manor, New York, a Republican caller. Hi, Scott.
Hi, how are you?
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. A wonderful morning to both of you. My question is concerning credibility of Congress in all of this. What credibility does Congress have left to govern with when basic physics has already proven that Building 7, World Trade Center 7, was brought down by explosives on 9/11, and the majority of congressmen are either willingly ignorant of this fact or can only offer rehearsed outrage in response to direct questions about this evidence?
Well, I think Congress's credibility has suffered quite a bit in recent weeks with the shutdown of the government. And one thing that we can do about the issues you raise and all of the other issues, we can start working together for example, to make the Affordable Care Act work. If there's allegations around the World Trade Center, to investigate those fully. And people really need to start working together in a bipartisan way for the good of the country. I really believe that.
Ruth is next. Lansing, Michigan.
Now, folks, regardless of whatever she really thinks or plans to do, this is significant. All right, and the reason is because, well, she said it on national television. And I have no idea how much Congresswoman Degette really knows about the issue. But the fact that she says this goes to show how common sense her sentiment is. And of course the sentiment I'm referring to is her statement saying if there's allegations about the World Trade Center to investigate those fully. That we should investigate those fully. And that means if there's any doubt about the official story that our government has placed so much stock in right up to this day, they should be fully looked into and not sprinted away from by the people who claim to be representing the interests of the people. And that seems like a no-brainer. And even if the Congresswoman was just spitballing here to appease the caller, the fact that she acknowledges this simple truth says a lot. That her immediate instinct told her that this is the most rational position to take. Thank you. I've been saying that for years. So there you go, folks. You got to just keep punching. Even if the monster is towering over you, you might land a right hook to its jaw when you least expect to. You never know. You just got to be persistent. In other news, there's a link within an article on 9/11 Blogger to a BBC propaganda piece that's crying about quote-unquote conspiracy theorists being the greatest threat to democracy. And being that BBC has lost all credibility over the years, mainly in my book because they reported on the fall of Building 7 20 or so minutes before it happened, and then they claimed to lose all of their footage of 9/11 when people were asking them about that. So it's kind of entertaining to see the BBC pretend like it's any kind of official voice anymore. And you know, a really good allegory for the corporate media in general right now would be to compare it to the bad guy cockroach character in Men in Black, who walks around disguised in human skin for most of that movie, trying to do his evil deeds there. And as the movie goes on, his disguise begins to fall apart, and enough of his real identity starts bleeding through that even though people don't know he's really a giant bug, they know there's something terribly wrong with him when he talks to them. And right now the BBC and MSNBC and CNN and all of them are exactly like that. All right, they're essentially saying to the public, don't listen to those conspiracy theorists. Excuse me, do you have any sugar water? All right, and cockroaches are falling out of their sleeves and crawling around on the table, and folks are seeing them for what they really are. And no matter what the corporate media says now its words are hollow. And that's because of people like you out there calling them out on their lies over the years. So good job to all of you. Keep it up, all right? Keep on posting comments in the comment boards and speaking back, pushing back when stories like this pop up. And finally, the Rethink 9/11 campaign has its billboard up across from the New York Times building, as I reported they were going to do a few weeks ago. And if you go to 9/11 Blogger, you're going to see that the campaign has an open letter up there addressing the New York Times. And I'm going to read that letter to the New York Times right now for you. The letter begins, "The Rethink 9/11 campaign has erected a billboard across the street from your headquarters to call your attention to the evidence cited by over 2,000 architects and engineers that proves that World Trade Center Building 7 was brought down by a controlled demolition on 9/11. We urge you to look at the evidence, starting with the video footage of the collapse, and publish an editorial stating your position on the challenges being made to the government's explanation of Building 7's destruction. The question of what happened to Building 7 is simply too important for the New York Times not to examine in a careful and balanced way. To that end, we urge that your editorial include, but not be limited to, the following information and facts." And here they list them in bullet points. The first bullet point says, "A link to this 30-second video showing the destruction of Building 7 from 4 different angles." And then it's got the link there. "We ask you to provide your readers with the necessary context by embedding this video in the online version of your editorial or providing the above link. According to the YouGov poll commissioned and released by the Rethink 9/11 campaign in September of 2013, 46% of Americans still do not know that a third tower fell on 9/11, and yet 46% of those who see this video footage suspect it was a controlled demolition, compared to only 28% who suspect it was caused by ordinary office fires." Next bullet point says, "Building 7 underwent absolute free fall during the first 2.25 seconds of its descent, as admitted finally by the National Institute of Standards and Technology in its final report on Building 7. However, NIST's computer simulation of Building 7's destruction does not include a period of free fall. Architects, engineers, and scientists who challenged the NIST report state that free fall could have only been achieved by removing all of the building's columns simultaneously with explosives." Final bullet point states, "NIST acknowledged that Building 7's collapse was the first known instance of a tall building brought down primarily by uncontrolled fires." The New York Times reported in November of 2001 that engineers and other experts were stunned by the collapse. FEMA's report published in May of 2002 stated that the cause of Building 7's collapse still remained unknown and that the best hypothesis had only a low probability of occurrence. And yet the New York City Office of Emergency Management and others on the scene knew with certainty early in the day that Building 7 would eventually come down. Thank you for your reconsideration of this most important issue. Sincerely, the Rethink 9/11 campaign and architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. So there you are, folks. The Rethink 9/11 campaign's calling out the New York Times and asking them to do their jobs. And the question is, will they do it? Well, I try to remain optimistic, and like I said before, we have to keep swinging. All right, maybe we'll land that right hook. But a lot of that also depends on you out there. So I'm issuing the call right now. Contact the New York Times yourself. Write to them or call them on the phone and say, "Hey, I read this open letter to you at 911blogger.com. saying, why aren't you covering Building 7? Why aren't you talking about the evidence that this building was obviously brought down in a controlled demolition? Are you going to try to be relevant in the 21st century as the corporate media loses more and more respect in the minds of the general public? Are you going to do your job, New York Times? Okay, what we're going to do right now is what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all of the people who have died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to take those 10 seconds starting right now. And that is 10 seconds. In the following interview, Ed Brotherton of We Are Change LA talks with me about his group's outreach efforts over the years. And, of course, We Are Change covers a more expansive list of issues than AE 9/11 Truth does. AE 9/11 Truth itself just focuses on the scientific evidence that the buildings in New York were, of course, brought down in controlled demolitions on 9/11. And occasionally the conversation in this interview touches on some other topics. So let me reiterate, the opinions expressed by the guests and myself on this show about issues outside of the building destructions in New York are simply our own and do not reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. And you're going to notice too in this interview that there is a constant clicking noise going on throughout it, and I apologize for that. I believe it has to do with the program I use to record my calls no longer being compatible with Skype. And I can't do anything about it with this interview, unfortunately. It's just there and we have to deal with it. The issue will definitely be resolved, though, for next week's show. So don't worry, this is not going to be a constant thing. But for now, I ask you to simply think of this like the clicks of a clock, reminding us how much time continues to pass as the victims of 9/11 wait for real justice. Ed Brotherton is a longtime activist with We Are Change Los Angeles. He's been at it for a number of years, and I'm sure he's got a lot of great stories to tell and a lot of insight to give us. Ed, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate being here.
Now, Ed, thank you for coming on the show. For our audience who may not know much about you, tell us more about yourself, including how did you wake up, just individually, to the 9/11 truth evidence, and what prompted you to take action?
Well, my name's Ed Brotherton. I've been involved in the 9/11 truth movement since around 2005 or so, when I was working in television production. I was working for a TV show that was very popular on the air. And an email started going around the office of images of that missile or plane, hitting the Pentagon. And that was at 5 frames. That became very questionable, and we all started to kind of talk about it in the office, and that's what kind of sparked my interest in trying to find out more. And just like anything that becomes questionable that the government does, the more you start peeling back the layers of the onion, the stinkier it gets, and the more rotten to the core it becomes.
Right, and that's interesting. A lot of people wake up for different reasons, different things open their eyes. And obviously, you started off with talking about the Pentagon issue, but you wake up to these other aspects. What about the whole 9/11 crime do you consider the most convincing evidence, in terms of evidence that you think is the most solid for waking people up?
Oh, it's a good question, and it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint that. But I think if you look at the way 9/11 went down, or how the official story is being sold to the public, if you look at the official story and just listen to it, it's absurd. And I think that that to me is the biggest eye-opener, because when you compare to what actually went down that day and what actually happened, with the buildings falling in free fall, there were explosions that could be heard, and then the subsequent cover-up, the stalling of the investigation, the destruction of evidence, the shipping all of it over to China, the fact that 19 Arab hijackers hijacked airplanes, bypassed the most sophisticated, defense system in the entire world with box cutters, and managed to create the damage that they created. It's just, after a while, you really start to look at that, it just becomes absolutely absurd, and for a number of reasons. And then you start to look at other possibilities and other people who may have had motive, means, and opportunity to carry off an attack of such magnitude. And that's the subject of a new book out by Kevin Ryan called Another 19, Investigating Legitimate 9/11 Suspects. And in that book, he actually calls out several people who actually had more of a motive, more of a means, and more of an opportunity to be able to carry out those type of attacks.
Right, and so what you're talking about is the entire collage of alleged coincidences, of facts that don't add up, of just total mutilation of scientific facts that just point to the fact that we were being lied to that day. It's not any one particular. Well, for some people, it is one particular thing. It's Building 7 for many people. When you watch that building falling down, you don't need a degree in engineering or experience with controlled demolition to know that you are seeing one. And so when you see all of this, you know that you're being lied to, and for you, it sounds like a whole big puzzle was put together to make you wake up to this. Now, what makes you go from somebody who, it sounds like you were working in some entertainment industry, and that's a hard industry to get into. There's a lot of people trying to do that. So you have a lot to on the line here. What makes you take that extra step from just being informed of it and saying, "Wow, that's bizarre," to actually taking an active leadership role and going out and informing the public of this?
Well, I've always been the type of person where I don't have any problem confronting things, and I served in the military. I was a military law enforcement for 4 years in the Air Force, and I remember many years ago when I was stationed at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, before it became the debacle it is now. During Operation Sea Signal, which was when all the Haitian refugees were floating over to Miami, we were actually picking them up in Coast Guard cutters and providing humanitarian relief for all these refugees. And I was over there for 4 months, and one of my master sergeants, I remember, sat me down one night, and he just told me all about every possible conspiracy theory you can possibly imagine at that time, back in '94, first I ever heard of this sort of thing. And he just sat me down one night and just spilled the beans, and it was a very interesting conversation. It was I really didn't give it much thought after the fact, but it kind of stayed with me, and then when I got out of the service, I got involved in a traffic issue, and I ended up defending myself in court, and that opened my eyes to a lot of things because I began to do legal research, and that opened my eyes to a lot of things there, and I ended up quasi-successfully defending myself in that case. But so my eyes were kind of open already to a lot of things that were going on that weren't quite right. So when this happened, it was, I reached out and saw some other people trying to find out what was really going on, and people coming together to kind of exchange ideas and talk about it and figure out what to do. And I just wanted to be a part of that here in Los Angeles, at least, and figure out, find people of like mind and who I could share information with and kind of figure out what's going on. And from there, it just never stopped.
Now, we mentioned earlier We Are Change, and probably most of our audience knows what We Are Change is and what it's done. However, there may be new people who are listening to this for the first time, maybe hearing this issue for the first time. So tell our audience, give us a little background. What is We Are Change? What does it do?
Well, We Are Change is a it's a grassroots movement started by a young man by the name of Luke Rudowski in New York. He basically started to, on his own volition, just confront a lot of these people who may have been involved or people who need to be questioned about certain things. And he decided to take it upon himself to confront them and just ask them point-blank questions. And kind of, they called it ambush journalism. Personally, I don't know if there's any other type of journalism, in my opinion. But he ended up putting his videos on YouTube, and they became viral and very popular. And he began an entire movement of other so-called ambush journalists. And what happened in Los Angeles with We Are Change Los Angeles was what was his name? Talk show host.
Bill Maher?
Bill Maher, yes, Bill Maher. There was a group of people who were involved in a 9/11 Truth group in Santa Monica called 9/11 Truth Los Angeles or something like that. And they had decided they were going to, because Bill Maher was speaking negatively about some of the 9/11 truthers, a small group of us decided to attend a Bill Maher showing, which was a live program, and many of us stood up in the crowd and started to confront him about Building 7, etc., right there on live television. I was not there, unfortunately. That would have been fun, but many of those people were dragged out and a couple were arrested, and it went viral. It went all over, got made national news, and people started emailing and trying to find out who are these people, where are they from, what group are they with. And they weren't really with a group at all. They just decided to do something. And from there, they decided to come up with We Are Change Los Angeles. Because there are many We Are Change organizations starting up all over the country and all over the world, we decided to start We Are Change LA, and we've been at it ever since.
Right, I remember that video of Bill Maher back when it was, I saw it on YouTube, but I guess it had happened, I forgot how many years ago, a couple of years now have passed, kind of all blending together for me. But, you know, to give some, 2000, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
But to give some background to the audience here, Bill Maher had made a joke because people had been writing him, asking him to talk about this issue, about mainly about the science, I think, of the Twin Towers and Building 7 falling down, and because I guess, you know, Bill Maher had come across as somebody who was slightly intelligent. As the years have gone by, and this is just me personally speaking, I don't really see Bill Maher as being all that smart, just more of a bitter person that enjoys feeling like he's smarter than other folks, and basically just gets off on that. That's my own personal opinion of the man. However, people did respect his opinion one time, so they were asking him to say this, and he had made a derogatory joke about people who question the government's account on 9/11, and so in protest to that, people sat in the crowd and they just kept on standing up in the middle of the broadcast, of the live broadcast, and interrupting it.
Yep.
And it's not I mean, you know, people can question whether or not, oh, do you really want to do that? But given the magnitude of the situation, given the magnitude of this event and this tremendous lie, why wouldn't you be screaming to the heavens about the evidence and doing everything you can? It's not violent, okay? You're not breaking the law by interrupting a live show and getting middle of some TV host chit-chat. There is no other issue bigger than this, and I applaud the people that were involved with that. I think that's great. I wish I'd led to see that happening more and more. Interrupt the din, the noisy party on the television, and bring the evidence to people however you can, whether it be on Bill Maher's show or you know, other programs that are recorded live. I don't know which ones they are. You could figure that out. But yeah, kudos to the people that did that.
Yeah,
now
we've done. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we've done not only Bill Maher, but since then we've done many different actions like that. We actually confronted Karl Rove when he came to town to do a book signing, and we had it all strategized out as far as how we're going to go in there. We bought tickets and actually went in there for a book signing where he was going to be speaking and asking, you know, doing a Q&A, and we were going to basically stand up, each of us were spread out, and that way it didn't look like we're all together. We had cameras rolling the whole time, small cameras, and we ended up ultimately chasing them out of town. I mean, literally. It was quite an event. That made news, too. Philip Think was there, but which we didn't know, which kind of helped to exacerbate the issue. But it was quite funny. We called him out on a couple of things, and next thing you know, he canceled the entire event, and everybody got upset who actually bought tickets and wanted to hear him, and it almost turned into a big old bar brawl, and it was quite hysterical because there were many of us who were playing good cop, bad cop to the crowd, and it was really confusing on everybody's part the way we were doing it because and they finally had to escort Karl Rove out of there and get him in the car and get the heck out of town. And I don't think he's been back ever since. But yes, we've been pretty successful on several of our actions in kind of thwarting the propaganda.
Right, and I think I remember this because wasn't there some guy who was obviously a Karl Rove fan starts yelling at one of the We Are Change protesters?
You ruined this event. You ruined it.
He's like some kind of child throwing a tantrum.
Yep.
It's really funny, and you know, I'm sorry he paid for his ticket and didn't get to see you know, Karl Rove. As wonderful as seeing Karl Rove is, I'm being sarcastic. But you know, folks, again, this is people died on 9/11.
Exactly.
And how many times can I state that? It seems like a very obvious statement, but sometimes it needs to be kind of rattled around in people's heads a little bit, is that this is not just trying to, this is not an issue where you're trying to just get some theater renamed.
Right.
Or,
this is murder. This is mass murder.
Exactly.
It's a mass murder case. That's what it is.
And I remember going on a show a few years ago, a blog talk radio show of some guy who was, a neocon wannabe, and he invites me on there to basically just make fun of me for an hour. But it was, I held my own. I did fine. It was in the beginning of my 9/11 truth career, quote unquote. And at one point, though, he did say a line, is that, if you really do believe this, then why wouldn't, how can you live? Why wouldn't you just be screaming this out at every second and doing something at every moment? Now, I feel like I am right now, as much as any human being possibly can, but he's right in that respect. And this is why we need to do as much as we can do. Even if you don't feel like you're the type of person that would stand up in the middle of an event with a famous person on the stage, even if you don't feel that you can do that, there's other things that you can do, and we'll be getting into that too. Absolutely. I just wanted to tell you, Ed, we just had Hillary Clinton come to my home area at Hamilton College. Now, I didn't stand up and interrupt it. We had something else planned. The thought did run through my mind. I didn't do it, but what really amazed me, and what doesn't amaze me, I'm kind of used to it. So a better word is just really kind of stuck with me, was the fact that they wouldn't even have a question and answer session. Because I called ahead of time to find out if they would, and really what they did is they had people submit pre-written questions ahead of time. And then they didn't even ask them themselves, because God forbid someone might get up there and change their mind about what they're going to ask. What they had is they had some lady sit out there on some couches with Hillary Clinton like it's the Oprah Winfrey show, and you just watch this lady interview her, basically. And they're saying, we got this question from LaToya Smith that, who's a student here. How does it feel being a woman in a man's world of politics? And then Hillary can stand and get some applause. And, but the thing is, I really think that she had a chance to hear the questions ahead of time and prepare her responses. And you see this even with the people calling into C-SPAN asking questions about 9/11 truth. They want to keep the conversation to just mundane, polite chit-chat.
Right.
And you don't embarrass anybody anymore. You don't embarrass these politicians. You don't embarrass these, I guess they're pundits now since they've left the White House. You don't do your job. Even when they're confronted, they lie. I mean, Mancow Mueller asked Donald Rumsfeld on his show about Building 7, and Donald Rumsfeld said he never heard of that. Now, folks, do you really believe that Donald Rumsfeld never heard of Building 7? One of the most significant events in his career, most significant days, he doesn't know the details about it? I think that's amazing. If he doesn't know about Building 7, then he was completely incompetent. That's
talk about. I mean, the thing about Donald Rumsfeld being incompetent. I mean that man has some amazing forethought because, on September 10th, 2001, he gave a speech before the Pentagon about the missing $2.3 trillion. But what most people don't realize is in that same speech, he made this comment. He said, "I don't want to attack the Pentagon. I want to liberate it. It needs to be freed from itself." Now, when I read that in the speech, it sent chills up my spine. Here's a man stating, "I don't want to attack the Pentagon," and sure enough, the next day the Pentagon gets attacked. And then he says, "It needs to be liberated. And I want to liberate it," meaning that I don't want to be accountable for that missing $2.3 trillion, and we're liable for it. And then it's freed from itself once all the accounting department was destroyed in the attack, and all the people investigating that lost money. So it was so eloquently spoken that he was telling us. It was like he was telling us, yeah, we're going to attack the Pentagon, and we're not going to worry about this $2.3 trillion missing.
Right, it's strange, and it's you can see this and look into these people, and we don't usually go into these areas on this show just because we stick to the hard science. That's our method. But there is a lot of strange stuff with all of that, and I've looked into it, and we've alluded to it tonight. Now, we're talking about interrupting speeches, and again, the audience may or may not want to do that, depending on their own comfort level. What do you feel, other than that, are the most effective forms of outreach from your experience? And can you give some examples?
Well, you just keep speaking. I mean, we've been at this for a very long time, and we have these 4 banners that we have, and they're great big blue 20, I can't remember how many feet they're, like 20 foot by 4 foot banners, and they have like 6 sticks that we hold them up with, and every time there's a march or some sort of event going on, we go down there with these banners. We have 5 of them, and they're donated to us, and they just take up the entire freaking events. They're so visually there that it's even the people, anti-war protesters and stuff, get upset with us because we're trying to bring this 9/11 truth message into their anti-war march without realizing that it's very much an anti-war message. So so that's one of the things we do as far as our visibility and getting that message out. Every time you take a picture of the entire protest, you can't help but get our signs in the picture. And we take these signs also on our overpasses on the freeways. Make sure you check your local laws and find out if that's legal or not. But in California, we can do that. So we hit all this traffic coming in, and we used to get a lot of people in the early days, give us, flip us off, and say nasty things to us. And over the years, we've noticed that the amount of that happening is dramatically reduced, and we're getting people honking, saying thank you. We're getting a lot more people really starting to wake up, and we're starting to see the sea change happening. And there's a lot of things you can do. You can also start your own meetup group. You can start your own Weird Change organization. You can the biggest thing, though, I think, is that you want to, when you talk to people about it, you want to do it on a gradient scale, because not everybody can confront everything at once. People everyone has a different confront and when you start speaking to somebody who's been in politics for 30 years and been a good government employee for 30 years, obviously they're not going to be as easy to sway as someone who has been screwed over by the system for 30 years. So everyone has their own different comfort level, but no matter who you approach or who you talk to, you have to find out on what gradient they can accept. What about 9/11 can they accept as truth? And when you find that out, then you basically raise the bar little by little, and as they accept more and more, eventually they come around and they start to see the truth.
Right, and I couldn't agree with you more on that. And again, I'm saying this to the audience right now, regardless of whatever you think the bigger picture amounts to, whether you think it's a big right-wing conspiracy, a big left-wing conspiracy, whatever you think it is, all right, I challenge you to make somebody understand that and explain it to them all in 2 minutes. Okay, it's nearly impossible to do that, and that's the average attention span, I would say, estimating of your average person, especially if they're just already been programmed not to hear any of this, to think that it's just nonsense because the TV's been telling them that. Now, I think, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Another thing I do too. Recently, I've been doing this, and it's been very, very effective. Now that a lot of time's gone by, is that I ask people who are really stuck on the official story. I ask them, "What is it about the official story you believe?" And that almost universally 100% converts them, because they start to explain, they start to think about it, and then they start to see the absurdity of what they're thinking about and the absurdity of the official story. Most people are so bent on trying to prove the truth or wrong, because that's cool to do, that they never stop to realize how absurd the official story is, and therefore opening the door to allow another alternative.
Right, and this is why Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is so important, people, because
Absolutely.
we talk about what opens people up and what makes people stop and think, and of course it's Building 7, because I've said it over and over again on this show, if you have one or two or one eyes, if you have any sight whatsoever and any common sense, you'll know that fire didn't bring that building down. Okay, and so when you start people focusing on that and focusing on the hard science, the 105 feet of free fall of Building 7, the fact with the Twin Towers, the fact that the top part of a building can't crush the lower part without slowing down, just basic common sense physics, all right, then that opens the door and they start asking, well, what is up with that? And then everything else just kind of unfurls, but that is the key right there that turns the lock in their minds. And then you've converted them to at least questioning, and if you can get people to agree to say, well, I don't believe it was some kind of big conspiracy, but yeah, it warrants a new investigation. Right there, that's all you need.
Right.
Okay, because that's what we're trying to get. We don't need them to believe in some bigger agenda or anything like that, because we just need the new investigation at this point. And if you can get them to agree that it needs to be investigated, right there you've converted them to our side.
Right. It's about the fact that we were not told the truth. Simple as that. We were not told the truth, and we need to be told the truth.
Exactly. Now, I read that you notified a judge of treason a few years ago with regard to what happened on 9/11. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Gosh, it was a while back. Basically, I was researching some law, trying to figure out different, trying to figure out other alternatives of what I can do to kind of help spring things along. Because I'm all about accountability. I'm a big fan of accountability, not just outreach. I really want to fight. And I read a law called misprision of felony. It's under 18 U.S.C. Section 4, I believe, or misprision of treason. And basically, what it states is, if you have knowledge of a crime that's been committed, or a felony, or treason, you have a responsibility. It's actually required under the law that you report that immediately to someone, whether a judge or someone in law enforcement. The law actually states it, who it is that you have to report it to. And so I decided, okay, I know treason was committed, and here's the evidence. I had the nanothermite report from Architects and Engineers, Now Living Truth. I had the testimony from William Rodriguez, and I had all this information on all this documentation. So I decided, okay, I want to follow this law, because if I don't follow it, I'm in violation of the law called misprision of treason. So I have to report it. So I figured I'd do my civic duty and go report this crime. So I walked into the courthouse in Van Nuys, and the clerk did not want to address it. However, I told her that the law says I have to go see a judge. And finally, I was able to walk into one of the courtrooms there and end up speaking to Judge Leland. And he was very, very nice. He was actually kind of perplexed about the whole situation. I don't think anybody had ever done this before. I told the bailiff why I was there. I had business to court, and explained to him that I'm here to report treason as required by this law. So the judge comes out and called my name and asked what I can do, what he can do for me. So I explained to him what I was doing, and he said, so he took to the court reporter and started putting it all on the record. And I got to speak quite a bit, actually, about the whole 9/11 thing. He said he hasn't had a chance to review any of the documents, but he'll definitely transmit it over to whoever it needs to be turned over to, and thank me for coming in. And that was about it. I didn't expect anything to happen from it, but I did do my civic duty, and it's just an example of what everybody can do. When you got floods and floods of people going into courthouses just reporting crimes, I think that could be a pretty powerful thing. And these judges are going to start getting wind, and people start taking notice. That's just
right. You're totally right about that. And again, this goes back to what I say, and I manage to sneak this quote into the show every week: 1 million small things done well are going to be what wins this war for us. And people will think, well, what can I do? I'm going to give it to the judge. He's going to ignore it. Well, again, it gets it on the court record. It gets it in the history that this was reported. Mm-hmm. And if you have all these people on their own, coming up to judges, talking about this 9/11 Building 7 thing, they're going to start talking with each other and being like, yeah, this guy came into my courtroom and had this misprision of treason, and what is this with this 9/11 thing?
Right.
Just like the folks calling into C-SPAN. I mean, if they're getting calls all the time about Building 7, 9/11, it's not about converting the hosts, people, of the show or the producers. I mean, personally, I don't care what any of these people on TV think, any of these people who are just paid to spread propaganda and make the audience feel like they're pacified and that their opinions are valued. Remember, folks, especially including C-SPAN, this is just glorified customer service reps on TV that you're looking at. The important thing is to reach the audience, to get that drum beated into their mind. Building 7, 9/11, free fall. Building 7, 9/11, free fall. And people are going to be like, what is this? And they're going to Google it, and then they're going to make their own decisions based on the evidence. And, of course, the evidence shows that these buildings were brought down with a controlled demolition. Any rational person will come to that conclusion. And that is how change happens. It's not even so much about converting the people in quote-unquote positions of authority. If you can, great, guns, go with it. That's awesome.
Right.
But even if you don't, though, it's about reaching the people under them, because those people in positions of authority are nothing without the people under them holding them up with their tax money, holding them up with their compliance. And that's what you're trying to reach out to, is the people who have less to lose by waking up and speaking out.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
Now, that's a really interesting story. Now, I want to switch a little bit to activism, because that's what we focus a lot on with this show. We've got the evidence. The case has been proven. But obviously we still have a sleepy public out there that needs to be woken up. A lot of people have not woken up to this issue yet, so we've got to get the message to them. So you're working with We Are Change, which has been very effective, especially out there in Los Angeles with all the things you folks have done. I want to know, like, first of all, how do you start something like that, regardless of whether or not it's We Are Change or if you just want to be a 9/11 Truth group or something independent there? How do you get something like that going in your area? Even if you're in a big city and even if you're in a small rural area, can you go a little bit into discussion of that and give some advice to our audience?
Sure. I mean, the first thing that We Are Change Los Angeles did was they started a meetup group, and you go to meetup.com, and based on the subject matter, you can actually organize a meetup where other people of like mind will go and search out for your subject matter, your interests, and they will find, meetup will come up with all kinds of groups and organizations and meetups that fit your criteria that you're looking for, and you can sign up. And then the host of that meetup will actually start posting when and where or how often the group meets. And then you're able to meet other people of like mind at those events, and that's the biggest way and the smartest way I know of how to do it. That's how We Are Change started, as far as We Are Change in Los Angeles. And but it's not just, keep in mind though, it's not just a meetup group. We Are Change LA is actually an organization that is with meetup as an aspect to it. And our meetup has over 802 members. Very few are active, but people still want to be part of something and be able to get the information, etc. Many people moved away. Other people come back in. We had 2 new members today on our meeting. So it's always changing. The dynamics are always changing. And so that's one thing that it's the best way I know how to do it anyway.
Right, and there's also the traditional ways, too, to reach the people outside the Internet. You can put up flyers in your local supermarket when they got the pin-up boards out in the front of them.
Absolutely.
Or wherever there's a commons, at the libraries, at colleges, a good place, too, because you get a lot of kids with energy. And I'll tell you what, as I'm getting older, I'm starting to find out that youthful energy is a very important resource, because it starts diminishing as you get older. But so you can do it through those traditional means, but also, too, just by being very vocal. John Metters, who is a police officer who is with AE 9/11 Truth, and I've had him here on the show, is telling me a story about having, and I don't know all the details off the top of my head. I'll have to get a better understanding of the story. But he had something out on his car about Rethink 9/11, and he actually got a letter from somebody asking him about it on his windshield, I believe it was. So that woke people up, and that gets people together just by being very vocal or visible with a
that
sign.
Rethink 9/11 campaign is very, very successful. It was very, very smart because after a while, so much time goes by that people start to, the memory starts to wane. The whole idea that we will never forget. Well, people forget, and now A&E started the Rethink 9/11 movement, which was very, very smart because basically it's taking the idea of all the evidence and all the information that's been collected up to now, and now presenting it in a new way and repackaging it and saying, look, let's rethink this now. I think it was a very brilliant campaign. I'm really happy they did that.
Absolutely, and it's not ended either. It's where they're still continuing. They got a sign outside the New York Times now challenging them to cover the evidence about Building 7. So it still continues into this year, folks. You can go to rethink911.org and keep updated on what's going on with that campaign. And I was just thinking, I was just saying myself about being vocal. I remember a couple of years ago, might have been back in 2008, I would say, when I was working for, and I'm not going to say the company name, but it was a giant heartless corporation. And it was one of these places where they had so many people coming in and out. It was in customer service, and so you don't always know all the people you're working with. But anyway, I was going into the bathroom there talking to somebody about some of this stuff, and I wasn't even really saying much. We were at the tail end of our conversation, but some guy who was in there just kind of hears this tail end of the conversation, and he heard 9/11. He just kind of turns and he's just like, "Oh yeah, that was an inside job, And it was almost like an instant like brotherhood or something. I'm like, yeah, I know. So
right.
I mean, people just kind of, you hear their ears perk up when they hear certain things, and when they hear folks talking openly about something, then they feel more comfortable to speak out themselves. And now you've got a crowd. 3 is a crowd. It's a good crowd because it's a crowd speaking the truth, and that's what the opposition, the media, the guy that protects this lie is afraid of.
Yeah. So
we got to make them even more afraid. Now, once you get people together, obviously you have to deal with different personalities, and I've heard people say that, especially in 9/11 Truth, when you've got some very bold, unafraid people, that's the kind of personality that it's going to be the first to wake up to something like this. It's kind of like herding cats.
So we talked about this exact thing today at the meeting. That was the exact analogy somebody talked about was trying to herd cats, and I've done a photo shoot where I actually worked with a bunch of cats and actually had to herd them, so I know how impossible that can be. And but basically what you end up with is a very interesting dynamic because you have a whole bunch of very freedom-loving, free-spirited individuals who, by that very nature, are not good with conformity. So to try to organize under that sort of dynamic is very, very challenging. And one of the things I tried to do recently, and I just need more participation in it in order to make it successful, was an accountability campaign. Because I'm at the point now where I want to focus more on accountability than outreach. And what I want to do is try to figure out a way to harness the energy of all of our members without them having to get off their couch or come out to a meeting or, because not everybody can do that. They have jobs, they have lives, they have families. So not everyone can get out there and be as active as other people are. So what I did was I started this accountability campaign where, let's say, for example, something goes down in the world that needs attention. And there's an email set up where they would actually contact me via the email, and I would then read it, analyze it, assess it, contact the person who sent it, we'll talk about it, and figure out what is the best course of action. I will then create a action alert notification and email that basically instructing the entire group on what to do, what action to take, and when to take it. And then send that out, and then all at the same time, that action takes place. They then report back to me as to the results of the action, We collect the data, reanalyze it, reassess it, and then create a new action based on the new information. And this way, it's designed to create a massive amount of energy on one point versus a whole bunch of energy all spread out. And that's why we're not being that successful in getting any accountability, because the energy of the 9/11 truth movement is so dispersed among all kinds of different areas that not one person in the opposition is actually feeling the effect of the movement.
Right, and that is another reason, again, why architects and engineers is so important with what it brings, because the hard science is the starting point, and that's where a lot of energy should go, in terms of waking people up. If you're focusing on outreach, you're talking about accountability in your example, but in terms of outreach, that's why, exactly, I mean, I couldn't agree with you any more than that. It's important to hit on your strongest point, and just keep beating at it. And I remember my dad talking about boxing. My father was a big boxing fan, and he would say, if you keep on punching at somebody's arms, if the guy's blocking up that you're fighting, but you keep punching at his arms because you can't get at his head, well, eventually his arms are going to fall. Mm-hmm. His arms are going to fall down because they're going to get tired. Okay, and they're going to get all sore and weary, and then you can start taking headshots. Well, you wake people up to the controlled demolition of Building 7. Everyone knows there's something wrong with the official story. They're going to be more open, and I guess this goes back to what we were saying before, but they're going to be more open to the other stuff as well. But you got to focus all that energy on that one spot to open those gates.
Right, but it's also important. The energy also has to be focused on. Yeah, you're right. As far as the waking people up, and then when it comes to accountability, the energy has to be focused on the actual agency you're dealing with, or the law enforcement you're dealing with, or the judge that you're dealing with. Whoever's responsible for the accountability of this particular act. NIST covered up this element of the investigation. Who's responsible for making sure they're held accountable? When you find out who that person is, you send all members, everyone to that person, and you make sure that they get the job done and make that person accountable, because that's a lot of pressure coming at that one point. And you're basically applying the laws of physics, because you get enough pressure on one point, it's bound to break.
Now, how do you deal with the clashing personalities that will always come up in any group of strong-willed individuals, and get people to at least conform enough to kind of march in formation, to use that metaphor there, to march in formation and do these actions and for lack of a better word, off the top of my head, take orders?
You know what? It's a good question. And I guess I just close my eyes and hope. It's a challenge. We have several people who are very, very dedicated, and they will be there. Rains, hail, or snow, and no matter what. So, and those people you really, really can count on no matter what. And there's other people who, have. It's really kind of a tier. There's those who you can always count on, those you can count on sometimes, and those who will come out when there's food being served, and then there's there's those that'll come out when it's a big event. So it really all depends on how people want to participate. There's an old saying that says, ants well organized can bring down a mountain. But when you have a bunch of free-spirited individuals who who by that very nature, don't really conform well to any sort of leadership, it can be very challenging. But at the same time, it's really trying to find out the direction people want to go, and that can be challenging too. And because there's so many, we're getting bombarded from every angle with so much tyranny that there's many people in our group who are very big on the smart meter situation, and other people who are very big on traffic matters and the whole right to travel issue, like I am. There's other people who are very big on all the false flags going on. So we're constantly being bombarded with so many things that it's like, okay, you know, and it's almost like a strategy on their part to keep us all splintered, and they do it very effectively. So it's a good question, and it's really hard one to answer because it's just we just basically pick a focus and at any given time, and we just push forward with it and hope that we have some sort of success with it.
Now, Ed, before we go here, do you have any final thoughts, anything you want to tell the audience about what you're doing, or give, you know, for the future, something to leave them with?
You know, really, you know, it's funny. I saw the film last night, Ender's Game, or Game Ender's Game, I think it was. And spoiler alert, but I just wanted to bring something up that I thought was very interesting in the film that's kind of relevant to what we're talking about. And there was a scene in the film where this boy is getting hit by a bully, and they get into a fight. And the boy ends up putting the bully on the ground and kicks him. And he continues to kick him. And he's kicking him, and they find the fight finally was broken up. And when he was called into his commander's office, and he was asked, why did he continue to kick the boy? And the boy told him and said, well, when I knocked him down and gave him the first kick, that was the first fight. When I continued kicking him, that was to make sure that was for all the other fights. In other words, it's sort of like when it comes to the issue of 9/11 and government tyranny, trying to pick an issue that we can confront them with that will make them think twice about ever doing it again. And you know, how do we confront these people who did this horrific act in a way to, you know, it's one thing to win the fight. How do we make sure that they never want to do it again? And I think that's something that we really start to need to think about. And it might be a requirement to where we all need to start really taking responsibility and up on our game and really, really start taking this stuff seriously. And I think once we start doing that, it will be the repeated kick in the gut of the government, and it was the tyrannical people who are responsible for these horrific acts to make them not ever want to do this sort of thing again. And so, yeah, I just leave with that.
Ed Brotherton, thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week.